Hi there, everyone. It is 1 o'clock. Welcome to the Wednesday ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. I'm Najah Ali Khan, ACSA Senior Director of Marketing and Communications. Welcome. Make sure to drop in your comments on our chat. We are always happy to welcome you onto the show. Tell us where you're watching from, what's happening in your region and in your school district. We've got a really packed show for you today. We're going to give you a few updates that have come in from the state capitol and from CDE over the last 36 hours. We are going to preview the ACSA Leadership Summit, which comes your way first week of November. We've also got a really interesting topic for you today: communicating during the COVID-19 pandemic. I will tell you, as a professional communicator, everybody thinks they're a really good communicator, but the pandemic has forced us to manipulate a lot of things. So we have two of the top communications professionals in California public schools with us today to talk about some of the best practices and their experiences during this COVID-19 pandemic. You might be wondering, where is Edgar today? ACSA Senior Director of Policy and Governmental Relations, my co-host on the show. He is what those of us in TV like to call on assignment today. He has had meetings all morning, as I have, but he is in another meeting that he couldn't get away from. And you guys know, Edgar doesn't miss this show. It is the highlight of his week, like mine. But this was obviously an important meeting, so he wasn't able to get out of it. Let me talk to you just for a couple of minutes here about a couple of advocacy and GR updates for you. We had expected that there was going to be some type of a update on youth sports, because this is a topic that matters to so many people here up and down the state. We talked briefly about it last week, how we had expected that there would be something Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of this week about youth sports. We have not received any information right now as far as youth sports are concerned. Right after last week's show, you remember we talked about it for about a minute or so. I contacted Ron Nochetti, the executive director from CIF, the California Interscholastic Federation. He's been a visitor on this show before, and he said they had no updates at that time. They had been talking to the governor's office, but at that point, they did not have any updated information. And here we are, we're about a week after, and there is still no information on youth sports. Clearly a sense of frustration, I would assume, for many of our viewers and their school communities. I will point you, though, and we're going to have Gianna put something into the chat. This is an article that was in the San Diego Union Tribune earlier this week about the economic impact of youth sports not happening in certain communities, especially like in San Diego, where there are so many softball and soccer tournaments that happen every year. It's reached that point where some of these tournaments are moving out of state now to be able to go on as planned. And so that's a consideration. It's clearly an equity issue. If you think about it, a lot of these clubs are the pay-to-play kind of clubs. And so moving out of state to be able to conduct them, because the rules right now aren't clear here in California for youth sports, certainly a problem. Let's go ahead and say hello to some of our members out there, some of our viewers. Manny Nunez, we were literally just talking about you, Manny, right before the show began. One of our great members, member over at Monterey Peninsula Unified. So Manny, good to see you today. Nicole Price watching us on YouTube today. Anna's watching us today on YouTube. Tracy, Daniel Hernandez, our ACSA board member from Sac City Unified. He is watching us today. Oliver, good to see you from Pomona Unified. Betsy, good to see you. And Scott Smith. We literally called out a lot today. My internet, as you would imagine, iffy, but we'll continue to move through this. Let's talk communications right now, because communications is so important. Being able to disseminate information down into our school communities, so important right now. And everything has changed with the pandemic, as you know, and that includes communication. So we brought in two of the top California public school communications professionals to join us today. Let me bring them on. Michelle Eklund is the Chief Communications Officer at the Placer County Office of Education, formerly from California State PTA. Marcy McFadden is the Chief of Communications and Engagement at Monterey Peninsula Unified, also an ACSA member. Marcy, clearly you got Manny to watch the show. So clearly people in your office knew that you were going to be on here today.
No, I didn't get him to watch the show. He texted me and said, "Hey, I saw this advertisement." I didn't tell him to watch.
See, perfect. That's what we like to see. And Debbie Strand, our communications person over in Calaveras County Office of Ed. Debbie, good to have you on the show. Let me ask you both first, and Michelle, I'm going to start with you, and then Marcy after that. Both of you guys have unique stakeholders that you speak with. Michelle, being in the county office of ed, you have a different group, a lot of districts, a lot of administrators that you're talking to. Marcy, you're down in the district level, so you have not only the administrators, but students, staff, parents, the school community. When you receive information from CDE, from the state capitol, obviously it can be a little dense at times. Tell us, how do you go ahead and just wean that down, synthesize it, and then distribute that out? Michelle, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think, oftentimes information you get from the state in any capacity tends to be like an insider baseball kind of jargon, and it's really easy to get caught up in that jargon. Remembering to take a step back, who actually needs to hear that information and what does it mean to them? Sometimes there's this need to communicate quickly every time the governor does a press conference and be the first one to send out information. And it's more important that we're accurate in our information and accurate to the appropriate stakeholder. Sometimes one piece of information means something different if you're a local elected official, if you're a local school district superintendent, or if you're a parent of a student attending a public or even a private school. So really looking at what really is the information, who needs that, which stakeholder group are you going to communicate it to? Very rarely is everything a blanket piece of information that just goes out countywide.
Michelle said, and what we do, like you said, I think our biggest stakeholder are our parents. And then obviously, as you said, our site leaders and our directors and so forth. But a lot of times we'll take the information and then we'll do pictorials or we'll do visuals, because for our families, a lot of them may not have a high school or college education. So we just need to really cull it down and do visuals. And plus we're pushing out so much information to families these days. With the technology is a great thing, but then it's also a bad thing too, because we might be pushing out hundreds of pieces of information. So really just synthesizing, and then like maybe even packaging it. It all goes on one day, or it goes at the same time each day. And then also using our site leaders. Sometimes our parents want to hear from our site leaders more than they want to hear from the district. So using our site leaders and developing that communication for them and making it easier for them to push it out to their families. So really just boiling it down. And the most successful thing for us is making visuals for our families.
And folks, if you want to jump in with a question or comment today, please do so on our chat, whether you're watching on ACSA Facebook or ACSA YouTube. We're happy to have Denise and Laura and Angela Shell. Angela are a very consistent viewer of our show. So clearly she likes watching us, which I can always appreciate. Let me ask both of you, and Marcy, we'll start with you. Biggest successes and challenges for you, your communications team, your communications operation during this pandemic. And let's take it all the way back to March, when schools began to close, up until now. I just did the math yesterday, and that's like 7 months. Successes and challenges during that stretch.
Sure. I think one of our biggest successes is stepping even back before the pandemic. We had just switched over to a new communication system to our families, Parent Square. And I tease with my boss. I say, if I ever leave, I think the best thing I did for this district was bring Parent Square to our district. And the reason why is it allows for two-way communication. And we're at the point now where we can reach pretty much 100% of our families, either through a post through Parent Square, a text, an email, or an all call. So we have a system that allows for two-way, and parents engage with us. So that would be number one. But I think one of our biggest successes was really engaging our stakeholders. And then we developed these things called town halls. And it was pretty much just open cabinet chat, talking with our cabinet leaders and our superintendent, and just our superintendent would maybe do a 5-10 minute presentation, but then we'd spend the next 50 to 60 minutes letting families, stakeholders, teachers, classified staff ask questions. And I think a lot of times, even if we didn't know the answer, the fact that we were talking about it, they knew we were thinking about it, strategizing about it. So just having that open communication and just an outlet and a forum for them to just ask those questions, to be, just relieve some of the anxiety they have. So I think the biggest thing all the way back to March was really just having these. At the time, we were doing almost every week town halls, and we would have upwards of 1,000 or more people on, which is the most we've ever had. I do an LCAP community engagement pre-COVID, I'd have 10 people show up. So you do these virtual now, and everyone shows up. So I love these virtual town halls that we're hosting.
I think for us, our biggest challenge is I think people assumed that every time the governor did a Friday press conference about education that we somehow had inside knowledge. And we didn't. We were watching along on Facebook or on YouTube or on the news, just like everybody else. So really dealing with the kind of ever-changing information, the ever-changing guidance, the whirlwind, and the quickness that information was coming at us was, I think, one of the biggest challenges communication-wise. One of our biggest successes, I think, in Placer County was establishing those meetings right off the bat with Placer County Public Health, our district superintendents and charter school leaders. And that's really been kind of the bedrock of our communication strategies. We kind of agreed early on in our county that those closest to the students and the families at the school district level would be the primary communicator. So one of the things I'm really proud of at our county office is we were drafting a lot of the templates and talking points and giving some guidance and some framework so that our school districts were sharing similar information, but they had the ability to customize and tailor it to their individual needs. So I think that was one of the greatest successes communication-wise. And then we opened Placer County school testing sites totally on the back end of things. We didn't communicate it a lot, but I'm super proud of our office for the behind-the-scenes work that happened in that.
Marcy, we got a question in from Terry Sanders. She asks, what mechanisms/activities do you use to listen to your audiences, primarily your parents? We talked so much about parental engagement, especially down at the district level. What mechanisms or activities are you using to listen to audiences?
Sure. So we've done two things since March, actually. We did a lot of parent surveys, and we actually had this open-ended piece where we'd read all the comments and actually work with our leaders, depending on the school site, push it back out and have leaders get back to them, or I would. But then really, I think our biggest thing was doing these town halls. And I know I keep harping on it, but people could sign on and visually see us, or if they don't have access, they could call in. And so they would just voice some of their concerns and so forth. And what I love about our leadership team and my superintendent, he's so open to hearing this, and we actually take action from it. And we hear what people are saying and we act on it and try to affect change as much as possible. I hope that helps.
And Michelle, I saw you had a best practice as well.
Well, I think for us in working with our parent group, so Placer County, one of the things that makes us unique is we serve as the county office, but we're also kind of like a mini LEA. We serve parents, we serve students with special disabilities and alternative education settings. So sometimes parent communication looks a little bit different. We're sometimes, old school on the phone, using school messenger, social media, doing any kind of reach out that we can.
I do have to say, you guys were mentioning Parent Square, and Denise Patton mentions how amazing it is, and they've been using it for 3 years. Michelle, let me ask you this. This is from Holly Eads, who's our former ACSA president. She asked the question, how are you handling communications planning in these challenging times? How do you map out what to push out when and to whom without overwhelming the stakeholders? And I think, Michelle, because you guys have such a unique community where you have some large suburban districts, but then you have some smaller rural districts. It really requires some element of determining your audience. How do you go about handling that?
Well, speaking from a true type A personality that I am, I love to use content calendars. I love to use planning mechanisms. And some of that kind of goes out the window during a pandemic. I think one of the best things that I started using, even for myself, was just a communications cheat sheet listing who all of our audiences are. Is it our cabinet? Is it the media? Is it a school district? Is it a particular area? What tactics are available? And even just starting from that helps plan out a little bit, even if it's day by day, hour by hour. A lot of our school districts have been really successful with consistency of messaging, knowing that they're going to share something with their parents or with their families every Friday or every Tuesday. So as much as we'd like to plan, sometimes that planning is hour by hour.
Hey, let me ask you guys about social media, because social media can be so positively impactful, and then it can also be a grease fire. I have told people many times that social media, especially Facebook, sorry, Facebook, we're live on you right now, but sometimes Facebook just serves as the platform for people to scream. In your role, how do you remain fluid with social media, monitoring the information, but also being able to distribute the information? Marcy, we'll start with you on that.
Sure. So I'm kind of a social media junkie. So I have all the apps that we control on my phone. And then my colleague, my marketing assistant, he does as well. So we try to push out no little than like 3 times a week. But I think our biggest thing that we do is we push out just information that parents want to see. And it's about what their kids are doing in the classroom, what teachers are doing and so forth at the school site. So even when we're in a distance learning platform, we do whatever we can to reach out to our school sites. Like, hey, what's going on with kids? What's going on with teachers? Because we want to push the things that are happening directly in the classroom. So that's one. And then the other thing we do is I also follow all of my school sites. And instead of us recreating the wheel, I repurpose their stuff and I tag them and push out theirs to try to grow their following.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think a lot of it has to do, again, like I said at the very beginning, who is the best communicator to a particular audience? And that's not always the County Office of Education. Most often it's our local school districts. So what we would do with our social media platforms is kind of the broader overreaching messaging and allow our school districts to share the details. Our school districts would engage and dispel myths and answer questions in chat. I didn't do that as much for our county office. I really use social media as a way to get the pulse of the broader community, what topics were coming up in chat rooms, in different Facebook groups, so that we could pre-plan out some messaging to support our school districts. And it's a case of trying not to poke the hornet's nest sometimes on social media, but it's a great way to get immediate feedback on what the hot topics are and what the emerging hot topics are.
Let me ask both of you, and Michelle, we'll start with you on this one. Angela Shaw, our loyal viewer, asks, communication in a virtual world can be challenging, particularly in a rural area. How do you combine communication efforts between LEAs, public health, COEs, etc.? Because you guys have unique people that you're trying to communicate with. This would apply to both of you. So Michelle, we'll start with you on that.
Yeah, I think in Placer County, it was really a collaborative effort between the county office and our local school districts, even down to site principals and school leaders, really knowing and understanding their community, not relying overly on just social media or just regular media. We had principals making phone calls to homes, sharing information. So it really just depends on knowing your school community. From the county office, like I said, we really provided some of those templates and those overall messaging, but we left it to the school districts. They know their students best. They know how to reach them, where to reach them. And they're the ones that have been engaging with parent engagement work years ago when the LCAP first came out. So we really counted on them. We also were a mechanism if they had questions or needed help, we would jump in.
I would have to agree too. Just this whole coordination. I really appreciate our county office of education. They have been collaborating, obviously, with county health themselves and all of our districts. And so we get a lot of stuff, as Michelle pointed out. They develop templates, talking points. We take a lot of stuff from our county office of ed and then tweak it and push it out. One of the things we're doing right now, Seaside became a first state-sponsored COVID testing site yesterday, and this is an example of trying to coordinate. So I was on the text message with county health, our county office, and ourselves, trying to make sure it all worked out. We ran into some glitches, but just having even to know the numbers or the emails to call, like, we're running this problem, what can you do, how can you help us, and to work out some of those glitches. So I think, as Michelle said, just the partnership and just being in sync with each other.
Yeah, I knowing that you guys are communications professionals, you have probably heard many people say that they are a great communicator. But communicating during this pandemic has been this completely uphill battle for everybody that's on in the communications field. What are some of your best practices? Marcy, we'll start with you. What are some of your best practices for moving successfully through this pandemic with communications, and how are you able to support your entire school community?
I would say people always ask me like, what do you do in your job? Because they're thinking, oh, you just do media stuff. No, it's not just media. And I would say 75% of my job is supporting our school site leaders. I would say pretty much everything I do and I write for or do is to help make our principals' jobs easier. So I think it's one, supporting our school site principals, and then just making sure we're branding our district and everything we send out looks the same, feels the same, and we're doing it at the same time. For example, we have a weekly e-newsletter that goes out at 5:30 every morning on Tuesday to staff, or I have on Fridays our MPUSD Minute that goes out. So people know when to look for things, similar to this, ACSA lunch hour thing. People know what date, what time to look for stuff. So just consistently branding stuff, even though you're in a pandemic, doesn't mean all your regular stuff gets thrown out the window.
And Michelle, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with Marcy. And I think not all communication happens in the forefront. There's a lot that happens behind the scenes in supporting district leaders. Our goal is to support what they want to do and to support their efforts. So it sometimes looks different, and not overly relying on one tool, I think, is important too. There's video, there's social media, there's so many avenues for communication that just don't go away during a pandemic. And in fact, they become more and more important. You can't assume that one family or one parent's going to hear something the one time you put it in a newsletter. It's a repetitive thing. To steal from my friends at California State PTA, it's speaking with one voice, right? Every child, one voice, and echoing that over and over and over again.
Daniel Hernandez, one of our board members, one of our ACSA board members, he asks, it's a two-part question here on YouTube. Parents are eagerly asking for answers about returning or not. Neighboring schools are opening and teachers' unions are vocal about their positions. How do each of you balance your message with the pressures from various contrasting interests? Marcy, let me start with you, because I think you had mentioned before the show that your area is still in purple. But answering that question, how do you deal with the pressures from various contrasting interests?
Sure. And that's kind of like this running joke that I have in my family. My husband's a superintendent. So we always say we love public education, but we don't love it right now because everyone hates us. And so I say that because you can't please everyone. So I think our biggest thing about balancing this is just being open. And what I appreciate about my superintendent, I'll say to him, hey, I'm feeling like we're getting a lot of noise over here and we really need to go out and address this and just get out in front of it. So we'll say like, let's put a message out. Can we write a message from you? Or we'll do like a quick little video like, hey, we know this is a hard time. We're trying our best. Here's where we are. So just giving an update, even if you don't have anything to say or you don't have an opening date, saying something's better than nothing, even if it's like, here's kind of where we are. So we'll do like a quick little video message, or we'll do a written message, or we'll, like you say, schedule a town hall. But just, even if you don't have anything to say, just even saying that, like, here's where we are. We're in purple. As soon as we get to red, we'll have more information.
Yeah, and I think it becomes, there's always a balance of conflicting interests. The pandemic just happens to heighten some of those issues right now. But through it all, it's an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity for your office, your district, your teachers, your school site staff to establish trust, establish great two-way communication, to reinforce that trust that you're building those things now. So when something else happens in the future, you've got a platform to work through. And things are going to be different district to district. They're going to be different county to county. And I think that's also, a challenging thing to explain to folks. We're not going to make everybody happy. And our job isn't necessarily to change minds on a certain topic. It's to provide facts, to provide, strategy and goals, and, to keep everybody as healthy and safe as we can.
All right, I'm going to ask you guys the question that I think every comms professional is asking themselves, and you are not allowed to say the two dirty words in communication, which is no comment. What has this experience been like for you? Not writing talking points, not providing any details, actually being on the other side of the camera. Michelle, I'm going to start with you on that.
Yeah, I'm just going to ruminate over and over about how many times I stuttered or missed a word or wasn't looking at the camera. I'm going to watch it back on Facebook and pick apart my own performance, which I would never do, for my superintendent or any of my cabinet members. It's a challenging thing to be on camera and to remember all the things that you're supposed to say and the perfect way to say it. It is much easier writing it on paper and coaching others to say it.
All right, Marcy, and you?
I will have to, I 100% agree with Michelle. It's harder to be on in front of the camera than it is to be behind the scenes. I love behind the scenes and, doing the talking points for everyone and saying, hey, this is what you need to do, or you did a great job. It was awesome. And I have a funny story. I think I shared this with you all at the beginning. 2 weeks ago, we were the KSBW was coming out here, and I said to my boss, hey, they're coming out here. Do you want to be on the camera? He's like, I'm not free. Go get our food services. She wasn't free. He's like, you'll do it. You're fine. It's all good. So I tell the media I'm going to be on it. And she said, I don't think I've ever interviewed you. I said, can I push out all the content experts? I never get in front of the camera. So like Michelle, I'm going to go back and go, God, I talked too fast, or I didn't say this, or I did this. So, but thanks for this opportunity, Naj.
Hey, and Lucy Rogers says you look great and are looking directly in the camera. So good job. That's the first time I've seen a comment from Lucy. Something tells me she's not directing that compliment my way. She's sending that to you guys. But hey, thanks so much for being with us today. Michelle Eklund, Chief Communications Officer for the Placer County Office of Ed. Marcy McFadden, Chief of Communications and Engagement at the Monterey Peninsula Unified School District. Guys, so good to see you. I'm sure we will see each other. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, folks. Oh, see, Manny Nunez wanted to come in and say we're thankful for our communications team. They're amazing at what they do. I couldn't agree with you more, Manny. Hey, folks, want to let you know about the all-virtual 2020 ACSA Leadership Summit. It's coming your way first week of November. It is scheduled for November 5th and 6th, but we're giving you an entire week of ACSA Leadership Summit. Here is a video preview of what we've got coming up for that week. Folks, I'm going to have Amy Collier, who's watching us on YouTube today, negotiate my next contract. Amy, you're going to have to be with me when I get my review later on this year. ACSA Leadership Summit. Let me just briefly give this to you. 50 plus workshops that you will be able to see beginning November 2nd all the way through November 10th. So you don't have to be sitting in front of your computer just for the 2 days of the live conference. You can actually view this professional development for an entire week. You don't have to choose which ones you go to. You have access to all of them. And then November 5th and 6th, we have live coverage of the Leadership Summit. That includes interactive question and answer sessions with our presenters, the keynote speeches, including the incredible Elizabeth Smart, plus a Q&A with those keynote speakers. We've got table talks, panels, virtual happy hour, our Every Student Succeeding Administrator of the Year award ceremony. Folks, 20 hours of live broadcast excellence with two people, with me, and with Michael Kelly, who's our ACSA storyteller. Folks, you have just literally sat with me all by myself for 30 minutes. Imagine what I'm going to be like at hour 12 of the 20 hours of live broadcast. ACSA.org/leadership summit. Now I'm going to put on my best Ron Popeil imitation here. No, I don't have a pasta maker for you or a pocket fisherman, but what I can tell you is that the next 50 people that register get the Summit Wellness Kit. I will make sure that it comes from the ACSA offices to you, the next 50 people who register. And folks, this is a really, really incredible kit, not just a beer koozie with ACSA's logo on it. This is stuff that you're really going to like. ACSA.org/leadership summit to register. A preview of the next couple of weeks. I promise Edgar's going to be back, because if he's not, well, then he clearly hasn't organized anything for post-election. Coming up next week, our guest is going to be Reg Lichty, our DC insider, to talk a little bit about what's happening in DC before the election. And then he's also going to talk about the federal stimulus, how that can or cannot impact California public education, and the budget coming up. Obviously, January is when the governor has his budget proposal that comes out. A lot of the stimulus discussion here in California is going to be about the impact on public education. So we'll have Reg Lichty on next Wednesday. Coming up after that, the day after the election, Kevin Gordon is going to join us to give us his post-election analysis of what took place the night before. That's all Edgar's responsibility. So if Kevin Gordon doesn't know yet, well, Kevin, you are going to be on the show, so just prepare for that. Folks, thank you so much for being with us today. Really, really appreciate it. Your questions, your comments were fantastic. We will see you again here next Wednesday. Remember, ACSA Leadership Summit registration, ACSA.org/leadership summit. Have a great rest of the week. We'll see you next Wednesday.